Well, welcome to another episode of The Platform. It's great to have Daniielle Alexis on the show. Her story is simply amazing.
She's a glamorous actress starring in an international television show, but until now, Daniielle Alexis has been hiding a secret. Daniielle was born a boy, telling Mark Gibson what it's like growing up in the wrong body.
I might be slayed down by haters and I might have negativity thrown at me, but this is really important that I do this.
Daniielle Alexis is smart, sassy and 6 feet tall. She also just happens to have been born a boy called Shane.
The biggest thing about Shane was lost and didn't know who he or she was.
These days, Danny appears in the Foxtel series Wentworth, just the second transgender actress on Australian TV. The first was Carlotta 45 years ago.
That to me is a privilege that I can be now Australia's first transgender actress on an international Foxtel Netflix series Wentworth, viewed in 140 countries. Amazing.
It's a spectacular view from the top, but getting there has been quite a journey. A child trapped in the wrong body, obsessed with his mum.
I would be idolising her. I'd watch her put her makeup on and get her hair done and things like that. And I was standing in front of the mirror and I would stand with my legs crossed. And I said to Mum, when I'm older, I want God to make me a girl. And that's powerful to me at 3.
Warwick High School was a tough place for a boy who longed to be a girl.
What happened to you in high school?
I was bashed repeatedly up against the brick walls, a lot of nudging, rugby nudges, slapped. They were so scared of what I was because of the lack of education that they took it out on me physically. Some days when I'd go to school, I would think, I'm fearing for my life. Like, I could go to school today and this could end really badly. And I want to live. You know, I wanted a life. And I had a plan for when I was going to leave school. And that plan was to have a better life, so
you were always planning to become a woman once you could?
yeah.
So she did, but Danielle's struggles were far from over.
When I had transitioned and I thought that everything was going to be okay and that my world was now going to be super happy and rainbows, it wasn't. I said to my mum, I can't live like this for much longer. Like, I can't live both. I can't mentally handle it. I can't look in the mirror. And my mum said, there's no need to worry anymore because myself and your grandfather have been saving up your whole life for this moment and we're going to fund your surgery. We've researched the best doctor in the world. And I remember just going, everything's going to be okay.
So as you can see, an incredible story, and it was great to get her on the platform. She took out her iPhone, jumped on Skype, and we set it up and filmed this. So Daniielle, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, we just saw the Today Tonight story that was done on you, which was pretty awesome.
Yes.
You can't help but feel like it's such an emotional story, you know, with your family and stuff, and looking back as a kid. I'm wondering if I can ask you about that. Like, as a kid, what was it like for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the interviews that I do are super emotional. I made a pact with myself that when I was to do public speaking and when I was to do interviews, that I would just be really raw and open. And I think that's the only way you can be when you're expressing your truth. So, you know, when you ask some questions and you want to give them a proper answer, I really think about it. And when you go back to that vulnerable place, it's like, wow. And it's obviously there's still a lot there that maybe I haven't dealt with, or things that I've spoken about that will always be emotional. So yeah, for me, it's definitely breaking down the happy parts of my childhood versus the really hard parts. And I think it's always beautiful to share both sides with people. So yeah.
Well, if you don't mind me asking you about the hard parts, because your story is so unique, and I mean, not many people could understand unless they've walked in your shoes what it would be like to be a little child and be confused about, who you should be a girl instead of a boy. Like, what was it like for you, nearly in all those times?
Yeah, I mean, even for me now, thinking about it, it's still confusing. I don't think that at any point that I felt like I'm transitioned and all is smiles and rainbows. I just constantly, even when I have to try to explain my surgery, that I had my gender confirmation surgery, the process of it, how it works, what it looks like, and all the intricate details for me that I'm like, wow, I've had to research that myself to give the correct answer. But I feel like for me, when I was younger, I expressed so many times to my mother that I wanted to be a woman, and that why was I so different to my sister Ashton, because I have an older sister, and trying to understand the physicalities in kind of, obviously, it doesn't matter in the physical form how we feel on the inside, because people will always judge us on the outside, and that's why we have labels, and that's why transgender is such a thing, because what you feel on the inside isn't enough. So for me, I just knew that I had to do whatever I needed to match what I was feeling on the inside to the outside. And even though I was feminine and I was constantly misgendered, even that wasn't enough. You know, people would be like, "Oh, how are you today, girls?" And I'd be like, "Oh, hi." You know, I had to like, I didn't like it, but I loved it. But then because I hadn't committed to changing over to Danielle at that age, people would still then throw at me, "Yeah, but you're a boy." So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a hard thing, and like I said before, it's a process and it's a journey. So I really had to turn the physicality of being a male into a female as quickly and as soon as possible.
I saw some pictures of you, I'm sure, either as a young teenager, and I can only imagine that at high school, and I don't mean to generalise, but boys at high school, when the lunchtime comes, they want to kick a football and they want to like run around and be crazy and do whatever. Girls might sit in groups and I don't know what they discuss or what goes on. But did you find like at high school that must have been like what was in your mind space? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, high school for me was actually a really horrible kind of traumatic experience, but at the same time it was also like fun and quite lovely, and I'll elaborate a little bit more. The trauma and the abuse and the bullying was the worst in high school versus primary school. But having said that, I had a group of girlfriends that was so supportive, so fiercely loyal, and very actually physically protective of me. I have a strong connection with Māori and Indigenous girls because of the fact that they were the ones that rallied behind me in high school and actually had to physically protect me at some point. So I've always had this massive respect for them, and still to this day when I meet people and stuff, I tell them that. But yeah, you know, it's funny because you've got at Warwick Senior High School where I went, you've got the boys that were the alpha and they were football or rugby or gangs and everything, and then even within girl groups you had like the bitchy girls, the cool girls, you know, the sporty girls or whatever. And I think that if I had to generalise it, it would definitely be that boys back then knew that I was different, but they also knew that I wasn't gay, because I remember that there was 2 guys in my school that were gay, and they were always called fag and all these derogatory terms, but I was always called like a girl or a he, she, or like, what are you? So it's funny because even back then no one knew what trans was really, like in my area, but they could still sense that there was something different. So I think that speaks, you know, highly in itself. But I definitely think that there was a massive rift, of course, and that's hugely a sign for me at that time to be like, well, where do I fit in, you know? And that was with the girls, and yeah, so.
Shane was popular and happy in primary school, but high school was a very different story.
They were like, what are you? Like, you're not gay, like, you're different, like, are you a girl or a boy? But they'd be aggressive about it.
Long-haired and effeminate, Shane was a constant target for bullies.
I was walking home from school and I was, like, running because I was trying to get away from this group of boys, and they threw, like, a chunk of brick on my head and it hit me. And I remember thinking, when I go home, I don't want to tell my mum what had happened because I knew she'd be so scared for me.
Leonie was worried, but she and her father had also been quietly preparing for Danny's future.
As a single parent initially, I would save for her surgery, but my father, he actually came forward and said he'd like to help Danny become the woman that she was always meant to be.
She doesn't even realise how much that meant to me. I'm so eternally grateful for my mum and my grandfather. A man that's so old that could have fought in the war, and he wasn't homophobic and just said, "I just want you to be happy, baby." I remember him calling me from the farm, probably with his shotgun, being like, "I'm proud of you, girl, we've got you."
Another great story was what the project did a special on you, and it featured your mum and your grandfather in such a cool way.
Oh, no, right.
I'd love to ask about them. How important are they to you, and that amazing moment of doing what they did for you?
Yes, they are both absolutely incredible. My pop's actually passed.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear.
Yeah, so he had a long, victorious life, and him and his wife, so my grandmother, who I called Marzi, were always my biggest supporters. So amazing. They're both from Brunswick, farmers, and definitely from an age group that you would imagine to be transphobic and homophobic, but they were so great. And I remember my pop was just so I've got a granddaughter, what next? He was so, just that is beautiful, because that's where I really think the mindset, especially for family, needs to come. It needs to just be what can we do for you? How can we support you? And that's exactly what he did without guidance. So it was incredible. And him and my mum together were obviously a huge part of my surgery. But my mum and my stepdad have been just an absolute amazing alliance for me, not only with financing surgery, but just support. And at my lowest times of my life, they were there to scrape me off the ground and quite literally help me to move on. And also at my most amazing times of my life, where I was super victorious in achievements and things, they were still there. So it's that light and shade and family support. You can't buy it. That's what I always say. You can't. And it's one of those things that some people aren't fortunate to have family, and a lot of LGBTQ people have been denied of that right of just having their families. And I've sat in the room before with trans women who have called their families, and their families have said, "You're dead to us. We've told the family you're not alive anymore, and that you died of the drug overdose," and all these crazy things that a normal person would listen to and say no, and why and how. So I never take my blessings for granted, and I just always try to preach the importance of family and support and how far it really goes.
That's awesome. Your grandfather's a legend. I'd love to ask you about acting. Where did the acting bug start for you? How did this journey start?
Yeah, the acting bug. Wow. So I come from a very creative family. Even though my mum's not a performer, my mum back in the day was a beautician and a makeup artist, so she was always really arty. And my dad, even though he's in trades and stuff, he's very hands-on and creative as well in that side. So I definitely know it's in our blood. My sisters are both singers. And for me, I think because I can't sing, I think that my mum was obviously I was always really dramatic and charismatic as a child, and I think that she was strategic in letting me do it to not only be able to use that as a talent, but almost to help find myself, because in acting you adapt other characters, and that's why a lot of people are shocked when they find out actors are shy, because they're how can they be shy? But that's the beauty of acting, because it's character work. So for me, it did exactly that. I was able to go to class and I was able to take on these characters, some being female, even if they were an old grandma. It still gave me that identity and that chameleon-like attitude. And even to this day, I take that on, and some people are just "Oh my God, you're so funny." I'm working in the mines at the moment, and this lady's "I've never met anyone like you before. You're crazy and you're so funny and you should do stand-up comedy." And I just think it's the acting bug. It's definitely in you. I went to a school called the Actors Lab in Melbourne with the amazing Peter Carlos, and he was a New York lecturer of acting, and he just said, acting can be taught, but an actor's an actor, and it's also a tool. So you've got to keep your craft sharp to be a really sharp on-tune actor. So it's definitely still for me a work in progress, but I think it's a part of my soul. So
she kicked me out at 16 just for wearing a dress. There's nothing to play devil's advocate for, because you know what? She is a shitty person. I appreciate what you're doing for me, babe, but you just need to back off.
Scar! Get the fuck away from me.
Why do you do this to yourself?
We read about you a lot because of Wentworth, and that's a super successful show. What was it like being part of that?
it was an absolute miracle getting the job. I worked very hard to get the job. A lot of people don't realise I was back and forth with auditions. I was meeting producers. I was going to Sydney and Melbourne on my own accord, having to pay my own flights and accommodation, and it was over a year process. And I remember the amazing Joe Porter, who's the executive producer, was having a meeting with Pino Amenta, who's the producer, and I thought I was just going for a meet and greet. And they told me that day at Fremantle Media headquarters, like, how would you like to be on season 5? And I remember at that point,
Wow.
I had worked so hard. I had prayed and manifested so hard and put in the work that I just was like, whoa, this is a moment. And being on Wentworth and being on the set with those girls, the biggest thing that I can rave about is imagine going to work every day and not only watching these actors on set and taking that in, but having lunch or breakfast with superstars of Australia and women that you once watched, because I watched Wentworth, and then now they're in front of me, and not as character but as people, and listening to their stories and about their life, and also letting them hear my story. You know, I remember some of them sat there crying their eyes out at my story of admiration to me, and I was like, wow, like, you know, I'm affecting these people too in a good way. And it was an absolute amazing journey, and I can't wait for more projects. So
you're having an amazing journey right now. Your story is incredible and should be a movie, because you mentioned before working in the mines.
yeah.
Like, tell us about that. What an unbelievable contrast.
I know, right? Well, yeah, and everyone in the acting industry is like, what? Like, even in America, they spin out because they're like, mining? Like, oh, what? And some of my friends over there even actually thought that I was on set, like, in the high vis. But how that all came about is I was working in mining personal training at first, on the campsites, as a side job. You know, all actors have side jobs. Because I'm a WA gal, mining is just normal here. So for me, it was smart to have a job that was fun, that paid well, and I had time off, because that's how I fit acting in. And see, when I got Wentworth, I was at Wheatstone, and then I left Wheatstone to go film in Melbourne. And of course, as life goes on and we wrapped Wentworth, it was up to me and my agent to come together with a plan about where I wanted to go to next. And that's taken me onto my new journey, which is working on getting an arts visa with the American immigration at the moment, which is what I'm doing, and I'll be moving on an O1 visa to Los Angeles. And mining still is my godsend, because that has cost a lot of money and it's been a lot of blood, sweat and tears for me, and that now is funding that dream that's about to start. So it's all just, you know, that hidden grace for me.
I know it's probably weird to say this in an interview, but I remember messaging you about this. Like, you really need to make your movie a story with you in it, because that is, if you think about the contrast of the outback, which is mines and WA, to Hollywood, and your story about this inspiring story of earning money so you can go live this ultimate dream, and then you end up on Wentworth on a massive show, sitting at a table with the great actresses of Australia. That is a movie.
I know. So if anyone's listening right now and this is published, please contact us.
There you go.
You know, I'm a smart girl, and the thing with me is I'm dedicated, I'm driven, I'm intelligent, and I will work on things slowly, and it all ends up becoming a part of this big collaboration. And for me, you know, whether it's definitely going to be a book. I've always wanted to write a book, but I've wanted to do that when I get older, so I've got more content. But I do want to have a film about my life, but I want the right person to make it, because with Australian film, I think it's really important to make sure that it's done right so that it can bring that story justice. And I haven't wanted to sell my story and bear myself and do all of this stuff for someone that, you know, I don't know and trust. And it's definitely, it's a process that I want to be done right, but I'm so open to that. And I think the most powerful thing about that movie will not only be educating people, but inspiring people. Because I feel like if I look back on my journey, it would definitely, everything I've been through is just to educate people purely on what trans is, who we are, what we're about, and also that as hard as your life can be and how many no's you can get, you can always succeed if you believe in yourself. And I'm living proof of that.
Well, there you go. If that's the message and you're going to LA and then hoping that the right project falls in your lap, your story is your project, and that will set you apart from everybody. At what point did you in your life feel, when you looked in the mirror, that you were happy with yourself, if you don't mind me asking? Like, I mean, teenage years would have been pretty hardcore, because I saw the pictures where you're a little boy with the longer hair and whatever, but looking at you now, it's kind of a crazy contrast. At what point were you like, okay, that's me?
I think that, God, I think it's so funny because, like, when I was younger, I felt so feminine, like I said, and, like, I knew that I was going to be a passable transgender woman. That's what we call it, passable. But I think there's two monumental moments for me. The first one was I had transitioned with a girlfriend when I was younger, obviously, and it was in my first 6 months of transitioning, so I was about 19. And I remember I was on this borderline of physicality, so I was wearing kind of unisex clothing, like skinny leg jeans and you know, a feminine jacket, and I'd had a bob length hair and was just very borderline. And I remember she was like, we're going to put in a full batch of extensions for you, and you're going to take off that jacket and start wearing your singlet with your bra because you've got your hormone breasts showing and stuff. And I was like, oh my God. And she put, I know this sounds really vain and like really materialistic, but it's true. She put in a full head of extensions for me, and I remember just flicking around my hair and being like, oh, I just feel even more girly. And I did exactly that. I wore a pink top that said princess on it, how typical. And I went for a walk to the Shell station in Mount Lawley in West Australia. And I remember this car load of guys was like, boop. And I was like actually startled because of that old school trauma. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And then this guy leaned out and was like, you're beep and hot. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh my God, yay. And like any girl watching right now would be like, oh my God, like any girl would like that. But for me, that was the turning point, because I was like, not only am I passable, but I'm hot. Like, yes, I'm like doing this well. And that kind of fed the beast. So that was a good point, but a bad point, because that, as you can imagine, brought the standard of me always thinking I had to look good and me having to impress and validation and things like that. But at the same time, it gave me a lot of comfort in who I am and knowing that the decision that I had made was a good one, and that I was, by being passable, which I keep using that word, as a transgender woman being passable, that actually changes your whole life. Because if you're a detectable transgender woman, you go through a lot more trauma and abuse, and because people are picking you every day, so they're picking your flaws. They're saying, oh my God, that's trans, like blah, blah, blah. And it's really damaging. And the fact that I went through maybe only 10% of that, you know, once again, I'm so lucky, very lucky.
Wow, totally. How do you find it with guys? Like, I imagine, like, I went over and filmed at Miss International Queen a couple of years ago, and we interviewed a lot of the girls there. And then in researching some of that stuff and some movies in Thailand they made, with the love story always seems to be kind of like this real desire to meet someone that they love, but also the hardship of like a straight guy. Just is it hard for you?
Yeah, it's, do you know what, like relationships is such an interesting thing for not only, like, to speak from my life personally and just trans women in general. I feel like I have not done too bad because I've had about 6 relationships since I've transitioned. And they've all been really normal, to be honest. They've all been post-op, except one, because I got a boyfriend kind of when I first started transitioning, which I loved him so much. But obviously, as you can imagine, I was going through a lot and hadn't found myself physically, so a lot of that was taken out on him. But I have to admit that a lot of my relationships were just so normal because they were like, we're just dating a girl. Like, you know, you talk about being trans all the time, but you're just a woman. And they would want to talk about it less than I did. But the one thing that I have to admit that did screw up constantly was the fact that no matter what they said, how comfortable they were with me, I was always thinking I was less than because I was trans and always had those insecurities that I hadn't dealt with. And once again, that can be really damaging because it just gets annoying in the end when you're super insecure and, you know, if you don't love yourself, someone else can't love you. And I'm only just learning that now at my age. And it's funny because I've come across a few lovely people in the last year, you know, a guy that I was seeing, and for the first time I was like, you know, my journey's in America, and all I've been praying for is career, because I need that right now in my life. And all of a sudden I'm not seeking that validation as much in a relationship because I know it's not the right timing. So I definitely think I'm in a good place in my life. But yeah, to summarize your question, relationships can be very, very hard for transgender women and men because we're often overjudged. People are way too paranoid and think too much. And if they don't, the trans person thinks too much. And it's something where we just need to peel back those labels and we just need to focus on who we are and the privacy between our own, the privacy between the walls of our own home, because that's what it comes down to, you know. So,
what's the one thing you want the world to know about transgender people?
That we are not freaks. We are not objects, and we are not all the same. Power comes through education. So I want to be able to educate people in what transgender is about and the fact that we live and breathe amongst you all. We are everywhere. You may not know, but we are.
What's the ultimate dream if you could live it? I love asking people about that. So what is it for you?
So my ultimate dream, and I already know what it is to be a full-time, successful, inspiring actress, part-time living in Los Angeles, part-time living in Australia. So I always have connection to my roots and my family. And outside of actressing, that's what we call it, I want to work within the LGBTQ community, doing charity works and inspiring young trans youth and homeless trans people to, you know, be strong, powerful people to continue our good work.
It's so cool to have you on the show. How do people find you if they want to follow you on the socials and stuff like that?
Yes, so I've got Facebook, which is Daniielle, spelled with the double I, Daniielle Alexis, Alexis, and Instagram is Daniielle Alexis as well.
All right, well, so cool to talk to you. I really hope your film gets made and your story gets told because that to me is the golden ticket, and great to have a chat.
Thank you so much, and you're a legend, and thank you for doing what you do, Andy, because you are getting the message out there for people that have things to say, and you are inspiring people as well. So it's very important to have these platforms, and I think they're great. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Everyone's got a story. Thank you.
All right, bye.
So there it is. Great to have her on the show, and I really mean it. I think her movie, I think it could be a low-budget sensation that would just go all around the world. It would just kill it on Netflix. It would be a great story to share. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the platform.